Alright, dudes, this is sort of development, or the development in the progression towards the completion of our project, right? So, this is spanning many years, okay, like 8 years or something like that, 8 or 9 years. Now, this first began with an epiphany wherein a vision of imagination. We were floating in space, and we discovered that if we had a way to move, we could move up to any speed. And then we developed the mathematics for that, P equals Cn over x, where P equals the number of pulses, Cn equals any speed, and s equals the speed of each acceleration. From there, we went and built the executive outline, which developed a system of industrial infrastructure between solar system planets and moons in order to build ships and fuel rockets in space that could take advantage of cumulative acceleration, get us to other stars, and solve for infinite exponential population growth. Discovered in this process that enough and correct resources were sufficiently placed in the local solar system to accomplish it. Then we went into independent relativity, and we went into the special theory of relativity to find the mathematical reason for FTL prevention. We discovered the stasis constant, 0 to c, and the temporary addition of mass only during acceleration, 0 plus a to c, where otherwise physical objects are moving 0. We went into the force imagination state where only one ship exists in a universe, and we determined a way to measure its speed, velocity, by counting pulses in the P equals Cn over x sequence, since no other objects were there. Speed here was always either 0 or acceleration, and mass gain was measurable by a weight and scale, or accelerometer on board. We finally changed the expression mc squared over 1 minus the square root of v squared over c squared to mc squared over 1 minus the square root of 0 plus a squared over c squared, allowing physical objects to have FTL under the cumulative acceleration program. Gravity. In the force of imagination state, where we were in a solitary universe, the question arose of what is gravity, and is it still there for our vehicle? Engines development. We began looking for other ways to move, not just by rockets, as the fuel and mass required was too burdensome, and we started trying to get speed out of electromagnetic and switches, electromagnets and switches. Yes, mass over 1 was determined for gravity of the ship in the solitary universe, and it was a moving 0 with a plus a temporary mass gain. Grid of light. We began to envision something like a grid of light, where spaces shrink in toward objects, and the objects shrink in an aspect relationship to them, to the space. That would be like, say, shrinking spaces. Say you have a Monopoly board and it has a space measurement of so big, and the piece in the Monopoly board, say your square that you move on, your squares are 1 inch, and your piece is like a ½ an inch size. If the square shrunk down to a ½ an inch, then the piece would shrink down to a ¼ an inch. That's what shrinking spaces are. Okay, mechanical engines. After several experimental failures with electromagnetic switch push engines, we experienced Precambrian explosion of mechanical types. Impact drives that use the hammer and anvil, bowstring drives that use kinetic and potential, electric motors to turn axles that gave the repetition necessary for the cumulative acceleration. And non-motorized versions with pedals could do the same thing for spacewalk. Then we developed the 3-stone warp space in the other video that we've already posted. And then RPM. Now, for RPM, we discovered that geometric motion on a spinning disk is given by a ray R. That is, right? Spinning. Circumference 2 pi r at a rate RPM, force equals mass times circumference times revolutions per minute. So that for a line segment AB resting on R, point A and point B have two different speeds, and the object goes towards the higher speed. So we applied it inversely to gravity and to the shrinking spaces. Now with that, we had the finalization of the grid of light to energy space. We discovered that volume equals mass equals energy, and all are one, and that the fourth dimension, called time, is a measure of frequency by volume. And that applied as in length, width, height, frequency, right? And that applied, in that applied energy will expand space-time. MC squared over 4 pi r squared divided by wavelength times volume. And these are the major equations for this presentation. I want to make sure that that's getting it. But I don't have a way to okay. So oh nice. Pink fluorescent light of June. So cumulative acceleration, P equals Cn over x. P is the number of pulses, Cn is any speed, x is the speed of acceleration. FTL mc squared over 1 minus the square root of 0 plus a squared over c squared equals mass over 1 when you're not accelerating. Energy space, mc squared over 4 pi r squared over wavelength times volume gives energy space, so that space and time shrink down and create mass, and the addition of energy to mass, it causes space and time to expand, and that causes gravity as a real result. Gravity is just the 4 pi r squared inside of that equation.